Okay, I'm sorry I left y'all hanging in that last video about Lucky and Tough. I didn't explain that one. So, Lucky and Tough are Mimi's last chicks that she hatched and raised. They were still little. She had just really... Might as well get used to Mimi, because that's all the time. Anyway. So she had taken them out, and it was cold. It was the first week of our winter, and she had taken them off the porch, down the steps, and they were going out into the yard. She was teaching them how to scrounge, how to hunt, how to, forage, that's the word. And Livy, our pig, she had a pan out there, a container, that we put her water in. The container's like a couple of, maybe 1.5 feet long, and maybe 1 foot wide, and it was, I'd say 3 or 4 inches deep, full of water. And of course, being in the 30s, the water was freezing cold. So she had taken them out. She hadn't been out long, and I went to take the kids out for the bus. As we go down the steps, Mason noticed that one of the chicks, they were still yellow. They didn't have any of their adult feathers. They were maybe a week old. We were really confused on why Mimi was taking them out there so young, because she usually waits till they're a few weeks before she does that. But no, she was taking them on out. And Mason looked down and said, "Oh, it's swimming, how cute." And I said, "No, it's not swimming, it's going to drown, they can't swim." So he reached down and he scooped it up out of the water, handed it to me. It was soaking wet, it was freezing. So he said, "Stick it in your pocket, Grandma." So I put it in my pocket, and I was holding it against me, trying to keep it warm. Went out, got them on the bus. As soon as I got them on the bus, I came inside, and I was holding it, and I set it on the counter, and I got a hand towel. I set the hand towel down, I put it over the chick, and I was trying to dry it off a little bit as best I could. It's just laid there on its side. Stop. It wasn't doing anything. It would not cheep. When it was in the water, it was just trying to barely stay above the water. It wasn't saying a word. Time out. So I did some real quick research, and I ran in our bathroom, and I got a little square heater. Brought it in there, set it on the counter, plugged it in. It's got a little fan on it. So, turned on the heater, had the fan blowing, and I went and got a meat thermometer, basically. Held it in front of the heater to see what the temperature was, so I could adjust how close Tough was, so she didn't get too hot. But she was close enough to get dried out and warmed up. And I was really thinking that this poor thing wasn't going to make it. So I stayed in the kitchen with her, and I'd walk over every few minutes and dry her off a little bit more. And I'd, turn her, and she started finally picking her head up a little bit, looking around. And I got her eventually to where she would actually sit up and not fall over and just be there. And she was finally sitting up, and then about another 10 or 15 minutes later, she would actually, I could stand her up on her legs, and she would stand up a little bit, and then she'd sit down. So she was actually just sitting upright and looking around. And we kept going like that. And all together it took, I'd say, between 45 minutes and an hour. But she was finally standing up, and she'd look around, and then she would take a couple of steps, and she would get a little closer to the heater, and she'd sit down, and she'd kind of fluff out a little bit, and she'd turn and fluff out some more. So eventually she was all dried out and all warmed back up, and she started hollering. Well, during the process, she would cheep just a little bit. Cheep just a little bit. It was very quiet. Very quiet. Then as she got warmed up and her strength back, she would start cheeping a little more. A little louder. She'd get louder. And I would look out the dining room window to see where her mama was and her brother. Didn't know it was a brother at the time. But I'd look to see where they were. And they were on the other side of the driveway, next to the fence. Just sitting there, looking around. So once she got really ready to go, and she was doing great, and she started hollering so loud for her mama, and I thought, there's no way Mimi cannot hear this child. So I walked back over to the window and I looked out, and as the baby was hollering, Mimi was trying to figure out, I hear her. Where is she? Where's the baby? But she didn't move. She didn't get up. So once the baby was ready to go, I picked it up and I carried her outside over to the fence. Mimi stood up like, what's going on? Why are you coming close to me? What are you doing? And I set the baby down a few feet away. Baby stepped off my hand, and here come Mama and their brother, and they come over there, and they just went on about their business like nothing ever happened. So that's why she's named Tough, because she was tough enough to survive that. She almost drowned and froze. Lucky, Spencer named him Lucky. I think it's because he was lucky he didn't get to go through that. But she's lucky, or he's lucky, and she's tough. She is very tough. So that's the part about that. And I also said I was going to tell you about the chickens roosting in the trees. Well, she who is always so noisy, Mimi, she's the one who actually taught the chickens to roost in a tree. Most people, when they have chickens, they build a coop. So the chickens all sleep in the coop. They live in the coop. They have a run, an area that the chickens come out of the coop. They go run around in their little chicken run. And then at the end of the day, they go back into their coop. Not these guys. We don't have a coop. Never have. They have always been free range. They run around wherever, do their thing. And at night, the few that sleep on the porch get up on the porch and roost there. We have, right now we're down to 2 who sleep inside the house. That is OG. Nugget is no longer with us. I'll tell that story later. And the one we were calling Missile, but her name's actually Jasmine. Sienna named her. So Jasmine, I feel, is still too small to be outside overnight. So she stays inside at night. Anyway, so there's a tree by our gate. Mimi, every night, would go up in the tree to sleep, unless she was sitting on an egg and raising chick. And as the other chickens started coming around, they would follow her up into the tree. So there's a few trees right there in the little line. You'll see that eventually. Every night there are 7 or 8 chickens. The chickens will spread out for the most part in the trees. But there's one particular limb that there will be 4 chickens on. It'll be Manib, May, Dove, and Mimi. And they'll all be on, the limb is not small, or not big, it's a very small limb. They'll all be on there, and every once in a while you'll hear them all up there complaining. Move over, there's not enough room, come on, scooch over. Somebody might fall out the tree. Then they gotta get back up there again, which is not easy for them to do, but they do it. It's a process.
No.
Window.
Very good.
No, it's not. Right there. What is that?
Yes.
But I got a picture of the 4 of them all crowded on that one limb in this one particular area. It's only about like this big, and the limb's maybe this big around. They're gonna be lucky if that thing don't break off one day and they all come tumbling down. Then they gotta pick another limb. So yeah, that's it about them sleeping in the trees. I think eventually, maybe Lucky and Tough might end up in the tree too. But that's a wait and find out kind of thing. We'll see later how it goes. And there's no telling what's going to happen with Jasmine, where she's going to end up. We may just end up with a handful of them just sleep on the porch all the time. Wouldn't be anything new. Anyways, I got to end this. It's getting too long. Love y'all. Bye.